You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast, the show that shows you how to master your mind to maximize your money. This show is for people who love to watch their bank accounts grow while shifting their relationship to money. Without further ado, let's get these insider insights from today's leading expert. This is Natalie. You're listening to the Mental Money Podcast. And if you're coming back, thank you for coming back. If this is your first time here, then welcome. We have some goodies for you today. This is one of the topics that are near and dear to my heart as a CFO. This is one of the topics that a lot of people don't consider when they're budgeting and considering their costs for starting a new business. So Lydia is going to help us break down some of these really, 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 really important topics. Only really because I'm biased about it, but really important topic. Lydia, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Natalie. It's great to be here. I love being a part of this and helping entrepreneurs, understand what they need to know, because when you're a small business and you're just starting out, you don't always know what you don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, that's literally like the goal of this, right? Speaking of which, that actually is the perfect segue into today's episode. So for the month pretty much for the last 4 weeks, this is pretty much the last week. And then we have next week, I'm going to do a bonus episode, with another accountant, but she's kind of attacking this from a different perspective. But this is pretty much the last week of our 4-week series on employment and the relationship between the employer and employee. And this also just happens to be the week that coincides with our grant proposal training that we've been doing. And tonight we're doing the second part of the training, which talks about like budgeting, projections. And when you're doing grant proposals, one thing they want to know is, what are you going to do with the funds? So you have to do a nice little spreadsheet that kind of goes through what you're going to do with the money. And part of that is employees, right? And I mentioned to the ladies last night that I actually had to, and I still look for funding too. So I mentioned to the ladies last night that I actually had to make an argument for looking for employees, because as a business owner now, a lot of integration with AI is saving us a lot of money as employers. So, I can cut my cost by over 75% for employees with just a click of a button almost. It's crazy, but I had to make an argument for funding by saying that my impact to the community would be to create jobs, right? Even with that being said, a lot of the ladies didn't realize that that was an impact to the community and that they should be considering hiring people as a cost, or even thinking of putting that as a cost into their overhead cost for projects, right? Lydia, help us. First of all, talk to us about what your background is and kind of like how you're going to help us understand all of these moving pieces.
Absolutely. So I have an accounting background. I started with tax working for H&R Block many, many years ago, and eventually got my accounting degree and opened my own firm and started working. And like a lot of you, I had an idea, I went for it and learned as I went along, built the plane as I'm flying, so to speak. And so with this, I can say, like, hiring, it has been one of the biggest areas that I see people struggle with. I've struggled with it myself, like figuring out, do you do contract employees versus our contract workers versus employees? What are the definitions of those, by the Labor Department and by the IRS, and then also looking at the cost of what that person's going to cost you and where that's going to fit into your budget and how you're going to, minimize turnover, minimize those things. What does it cost you when you have to spend, another 4 weeks training someone new,
Yeah.
And so how can you get the right person in the right seat the first time around?
Yeah. Not only are you an accountant, but you also have background hiring people and going through this entire process yourself. Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Fair enough. Okay. So, well, let's jump right in. First question, how do we determine the cost of hiring a new employee? What are we looking at? What are the pieces that we should consider point by point when we're looking to get that right person in the seat?
Right, absolutely. So one of the things you want to consider, what you know, obviously the first one is going to be their wages.
Hmm.
What are you paying them? Are you going to pay them an hourly rate? Are you going to pay them piecemeal for the work that they do? Are you going to pay them a salary or a flat rate? How are you going to manage that? Are they remote? Are they in person? That's going to make a difference.
Hmm.
And then you've also got the additional costs of insuring that worker.
Yeah.
So you're going to have that insurance. If you're like me, I'm a staff person and my people are remote, but I carry errors and omissions insurance.
Hmm.
Well, I have to include my staff members on that. So if they make a mistake, we're covered,
Yeah.
and not just one, myself, and then
Right.
we also have to consider, software and security for their computers to make sure that they're safe and that they're able to log in safely. So, if you have a location, do you have the office space to put another person in? You're going to need a desk. You're going to need, you, a computer, a printer, maybe, there may be things that you're going to need for that person to hire them on, if it's a salesperson, and then you're also going to have training
Right.
involved,
Right.
and time to train them because they're not going to come in and be able to pick up and do everything on day one. You're going to have to train them and figure out, and so they're probably not going to actually be bringing in or producing anything probably the first 2 weeks at minimum. You're most likely anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks is before they're going to be able to be actually producing income. And
Right.
so that's a cost too to you because you're going to be spending that time, or someone on your team is going to be spending that time training that person, onboarding that person, getting all those things in place so that they can do their job.
Right. Right. So let's say, okay, I don't know if you want to give an example from your business or if you want to give like maybe an industry standard from an industry that you're familiar to working with, but can you give like a figure for how much it might cost end to end before like someone is actually producing for average cost of getting someone in the door?
That is a very good question. I don't have a number off the top of my head. I would
Mhm.
say though, you're probably looking, I mean, it would depend on a lot of factors. Again,
Right.
the wages, the number of hours that they're working,
Mhm.
those type of things. But I would say you're probably looking at a good $500 minimum,
Right.
before they're actually producing. Like that's a very easy 1 month's pay probably, plus some expenses, depending on what type of expenses you have. If you have a computer already and you're not having to go out and buy that piece of equipment, that's
Mhm.
great. If you have to go out and buy new equipment for your new employee, then you're going to have that equipment cost in addition to training time. So you're looking at probably a month's worth of wages,
Mhm.
um, whatever equipment costs that, setup costs and that set, and then, whatever the cost is for the trainer and the training, if there's software training that they have to do that maybe you have to purchase. So you could look at probably upwards of $1,500
Right.
depending on the situation. It's really hard. Like, I'm a numbers girl and I like,
Yeah.
numbers and facts, but I can't tell you exactly because it would depend on each situation on what that number would look like. But
Right.
for someone in my position, I would say we're looking between $500 and $1,000 before that
Mhm.
person is, productive and bringing in, earning their keep, so to speak,
Right.
and actually being profitable. And then, again, depending on the industry, it could be, upwards of that, depending on how many hours. My current staff is part-time, so that's why that's kind of on
Mhm.
that lower
Yeah,
end of
and right.
500 to 1,000. That's probably a low end number just
Right.
because I don't have a lot of overhead because they're remote. I don't have they're part-time, so we don't have a lot of income, wages costs in there, so that's a lower amount. But again, like I said, it's going to depend on what industry you're in, and those are the things you're going to need to look for and spell out, so that you're going to be able to know, okay, and there's a ton of things to think about too.
Right.
Do I need is this software that I'm using, does that require an additional user, and is that come with a cost?
Right.
Some softwares are, they're connected to, okay, yeah, you can add up to 5 users for that base cost. Some of them, as soon as you add that second user, you're going to increase your costs on that. So you've got to keep all of those things in mind as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's interesting because we had when we had a home care. We have a home care agency I own a home care agency with my sister, and we also offer non-ambulatory transportation. And the home care agency piece is always a really delicate balance between caregiver to client ratio, because every time you accept a new client, you have to have 1.5 caregivers for them. So you have to have one dedicated caregiver and then a half, which is like a person who's pretty much on call in case that person decides that they don't want to come in that day or whatever the case may be. And that is always tricky because no one wants to really be on call. They want a dedicated position. So it's kind of like always a tricky shuffle. And you want to take on more clients, but there's always that delicate balance. And then you can't really onboard too many people just anticipating getting more clients, because you never know when you're going to get too many clients. So you're going to spend all this money hiring all these new people and then not have clients for them. So the balance was always like back and forth. And it was always an interesting thing to see, because you get calls and you're like, oh, can I have this client for you? I have this client for you. And I'm just like, okay, I don't have caregivers for them. And then we'd have an influx of caregivers and then no clients. So it's always funny to see that. And it's always the associated cost. That's always the problem, or that was always the problem at the time. So that's always something to be considering for sure.
Yeah, that is definitely one of those struggles, is trying to find that right balance. I'm onboarding new clients. Do I have the staff to manage that? And do I have and sometimes it works good to, in my case, I'm able to outsource to a staffing agency.
Right.
So they give me dedicated bookkeepers, and so I'm able to outsource that piece of it. And so it's just basically telling my staffing agency, hey, I need another, half a person, and we can adjust the cost. That's one of the ways I've gotten around that balance issue. But not everyone can do that. In your situation, that would be a much more difficult situation, and kind of trying to figure out, maybe hiring 2 or 3 people that are just on call, and so you have that they can rotate within the system or something like that. Those are off the top of my head solutions.
Yeah, no, for
I'm
sure.
sure you've thought them all out.
Yeah, those are old problems. Yeah, no, I understand.
But those are like that was just like an idea. Like when you were talking, I'm like, oh, this could be, this is a way you could do that as a solution. But those are things you have to think about. That a lot of people might not think about when they're first starting out. They're thinking, oh, I need one person. I need I need somebody to help with this. And so figuring out, I think the first step is always figuring out, is this a outsource position? Can I hire a graphic designer to do my marketing? Outsourcing that, or do I need someone in-house to do that as an employee? And then how do you do that balance, and how, what is the cost differentiator between having someone in-house doing that? We didn't even touch on, benefits, because with smaller businesses, that's not typically something that we think about. But as you grow, that is something you want to keep in mind. It's not just their salary amount. It's going to be, their health insurance. If you're offering that, it's going to be, 401k. You want to offer those things because other companies are offering those things. And if you don't, they're going to go where they can get those benefits and those things that
Right.
you need. And maybe you can't offer, full health insurance, but maybe you can offer a health reimbursement program
Right.
where you reimburse for certain things and different things. So it's like the hiring market is super competitive right now.
Hmm.
So it's really important that we think about all of the aspects of the job and how that impacts, what people want to see. And a lot of it, there's like we said, the main costs that we have, the direct cost is going to be those wages. That's
Right.
what we're going to be focused on, and that's what we think of. But then we've got all these indirect costs with insurance and,
Mm.
supplies and equipment and all of that sort of stuff. So we'll be able to, those are really going to be um things you want to calculate out, things you want to think about, and maybe think about, okay, this is what I can offer now, but what can I offer in the future as well? What do I want to be able to offer my people?
Right.
And look at those things as goals. Hey, this is a growth goal that I want to hit at some point, being able to offer my people health insurance or health um
Or
things,
benefits or other things like that,
benefits.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to ask questions about direct costs versus indirect costs. So could you maybe just define them for us so we know what they are and we can maybe just recognize them?
Yeah. So a direct cost is going to be the cost that you're paying directly to that person. So,
Mhm.
the direct cost of having that employee in your office. So that, for me, that would be their wages and any benefits I'm providing to them,
Right.
any of that health insurance, any of that type of stuff. Um, Indirect costs are going to be the things like the insurance that's going to increase because you have a team member on board, the perhaps the need for an extra office space or the equipment that you're going to provide them, as well as um, software costs increase, or
Mhm.
because you need to add another user,
Mhm.
or trying to think some other things that are more indirect, but yeah, those type of things are what's going to be your indirect costs that aren't directly related to having that you're not paying that out to that person,
Yeah,
but it's a cost of having them added to your team. And then
gotcha.
an additional indirect cost would also be, like the training cost,
Mm.
whatever you're going to be paying your yourself, or the cost of the hours that you're going to be putting in to train that person. Those are hours you're not working on the business, you're not making sales, you're not doing the things that you need to do, so that person, until that person is able to do it on their own. And so, that's a cost, either yourself or, like I said, a team member, if you're lucky enough to have a big enough team at that point.
Right.
So those are going to be indirect costs as well.
Right. Okay. So just a cost a thought or question that came to my mind. When you're thinking of how we've been asking the question of like, when do you know it's time to hire? And we've gotten that question answered. So I think we have a really good understanding of when it's time, but how do we know, or how can we quantify that we know it's the right time, but like that what the ROI on hiring that employee is going to be?
Hmm. I think, like, when you're looking at it, you're gonna look at it from the perspective, well, depending on the type of employee you're hiring,
Right.
will depend on what their ROI is. If
Right.
you're hiring somebody that's in sales, their ROI is going to be pretty easy to calculate,
Right. Sure.
because you're going to be able to see, okay, this person is adding X number of new clients. They'll be able, I'm able to I'm able to add 5 new clients a day. I
Hmm.
hire a salesperson, that doubles my impact. So now we're able to reach 10 new people a day.
Hmm. Right.
And that gives us, that broadens our reach there. So we're really, we're excited about that. That's one way to calculate the ROI. If you have somebody who's actually doing the work, so in my situation, I have bookkeepers and staff, staff that help manage the bookkeeping, then I can look and see, okay, they're saving me this much time. We're able to take on, X number of additional clients because I have this person. Like you figured out per client, the reverse of having needing 1.5 people per client is that you have, a new client for each 1.5 person that you hired.
Right.
And so you can look at it that way and figure out, okay, well, how many new clients can I take on if I add another person who's able to do this job?
Okay.
And what frees up your time to be able to do that, to do something else maybe, or to add a new program or something. Those are things that can calculate into that. But then the third one is a lot harder to do, and that's anyone who's working in your admin sphere. So if you're hiring a virtual assistant or an assistant for the office, that person's not going to actually be producing money, so to speak, not like a salesperson or a bookkeeper where you can say, oh, because I hired this person, I can take on 3 more clients. You know, we're not going to be able to do that calculation. The calculation you're going to get there is going to be the hours that you get back and the hours that you're able to spend doing something else. So if I can turn over, email and sales calls to my admin, and she's managing all of the day-to-day stuff and communicating with the bookkeepers and communicating with me and getting all of the things up to date, then that frees me up to focus on marketing and selling and, doing the coaching that I want to do. So I've got more time and I can take on more coaching clients than because she's taken the busy work off my plate. And so that's kind of how you would do that calculation to figure out for an admin person and figure out, okay, what if she takes on 20 hours a week, so to speak, that 20 hours is freeing up maybe not 20 hours of my time, but it's going to free up maybe 15 hours. Or 10 hours. It may not be an equal exchange because you're going to still have some stuff you're going to have to do. There are additional tasks when you add a new person.
Of course,
because now you have to communicate with that person. But it still makes it possible for us to do a calculation and kind of figure out, okay, this is what it's going to cost me to hire this person. And then this is the benefit I'm getting out of it. And we have to look at that. And sometimes the benefit is simply less stress for the business owner. I'm going to be honest. It may not be a monetary, you may not see that monetary right away. It just may mean, hey, I get to sleep at night, because I'm not the only one doing everything. So anyway, so those are your primary, I would say, primary ways of calculating ROI for that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah. So another one that we want to know how to calculate is turnover, because that's also a really big piece. And we actually just talked about micromanaging and how that leads to a lot of turnover. So how do we calculate turnover in our business?
So in your business, the turnover is going to be the cost that it's going to cost you to hire a new person and get them trained and onboarded. So we talked a little bit earlier about the idea of, hey, you've got probably 2 to 6 weeks, best case scenario, that this person, you're going to be training someone and you're probably going to be losing money on them because you're giving them money, but they're not producing anything. So basically turnover is going to be the amount of time that it's going to take you to train someone. You may also have time lost by having to put out an ad again, cost of running an ad, cost of maybe background checks that may have to be done. Again, if you have to pay for a training program for your people, the cost of that training program, All of that is what you're going to calculate into your turnover, because that's some of those things that are just they're things that are going to be calculated in the hiring cost. And then if you're losing people and having to rehire, the cost of every person that you have to rehire is in that rate. And then you've also got, when you're looking at turnover, you're looking at, how long do people tend to stick around,
Right.
and you want to keep people as long as possible, because you want to be able to hire them, train them, and allow, the longer they're with you, the more exponential their ROI becomes, because a lot of those costs are sunk costs in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so if you have those costs, you're not going to have to do all of those again with someone else.
Right.
If you have somebody that lasts 8 weeks, you got 2 weeks worth of work out of them, and essentially, and then you're back to trying to hire someone else and
Right.
get them in that position and do the training again. And loss of time is a huge factor in those situations.
For sure. Is unemployment a part of that equation at all too? Because I know sometimes unemployment insurance rates can change if I know there's too many claims that are being filed against your business. So is that part of like turnover costs as well?
Yes. So definitely, if you're seeing a lot of turnover and a lot of people making unemployment claims, your rate is most likely going to increase. It may not increase that first year, but in the next year, you're going to definitely possibly see an increase. Most likely, let's put it, most likely see an increase. And you're going to, that's going to make your ongoing costs, another indirect cost of hiring, more expensive. And so those things are a factor into what you're having to do and trying to keep, things going correctly for your business, and trying to keep costs low. And so the more turnover you have, the more people are going to the more you're going to pay in that unemployment insurance, and then obviously the more costs you have there.
Right. No, for sure. Yeah, that's don't ask me how I know that. Yeah, there was just right before the pandemic happened, like not even right before, like when the pandemic was happening, a lot of our clients end up falling out of our care because Massachusetts had changed like a bunch of protocols at the time. And we deal with a lot of like elderly individuals with the home care services. And so their family started stepping in. So the caregivers, we had to let them go. So a lot of people signed up for unemployment. And then we looked at the rate the subsequent year, and I'm just like, this is high. This is really, really high.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that was tough.
Yeah.
I bet that was tough for a lot of people because of that. I would look into your state laws about that, because they
Yeah.
were supposed to take that into consideration
Yes.
and not raise the rates
Yeah.
because of the pandemic, because so many people had to be let go because they couldn't do their jobs.
Yes, we end up getting a credit for it. So that was fine. But it just at the time, there was no account for what was going on. It's just it kind of we looked in the system and had gone up like point, I want to say like 1 point or something. It wasn't crazy, but I did notice a difference because that's my job to notice the difference. So I was just like, why is it up? And then I did the math and realized it was the pandemic and then the high turnover at that time. And then I called and we discussed it, and that's essentially we got the credit at that time. And then ERTC helped as well. So yeah, all those things considered, we're fine now. But still,
but
my
in
eyebrow was
general,
up.
when it's not a pandemic, that's going to happen. If you're losing people on a rapid rate, your insurance rates, those those unemployment insurance is going to go up because the state is going to have to pay out more claims on your behalf. And so they are going to look at that and make sure that, hey, you're paying your fair share, so to speak.
No, for
And that's
sure.
something that you can control. And then you've also got the costs of just like public opinion in a sense, because if there's a high turnover rate, people start questioning, hey, is this a place I want to apply for? So then the number of applications are going to go down. The ability to hire someone to fill those positions becomes more difficult,
Right.
just because, oh, you've gone through 3 admins in the last 6 months.
Right.
Yikes. Do I really want to work for you?
Right.
That sort of thing.
No, for sure. That's a good point.
And that was just a random number off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, that's a good point.
Example there.
That's funny. No, that's a good point. And we know about public opinion, boy. Whether they have all the facts or not, doesn't matter. So yeah, so what strategies do you use to reduce turnover then and its associated cost?
I think the first thing you want to do is make sure you're very clear about what you're looking for. I think that plays a huge part in the hiring process. So knowing what you need in that person, and even looking at like personality types and things like, hey, I don't want a person who is an introvert and very reclusive and not outgoing to be the person that's answering my phones. I need someone who's chipper and upbeat and has that can-do attitude to be the one that's answering the phones. And so you have to have that look at things like that. So one of the things I started doing is I started using personality tests as part of my review. Doing things to test their skills and abilities as part of the interview process is a good way to weed out people who may exaggerate on their resume.
No, I'm sorry. That was cute, Lydia, but let's just call it what it is. They lie. And they lie and they lie and they lie. And let me tell you why they're okay with lying, because I'm sorry, and I didn't mean to cut you off. I really don't.
You're fine.
Because on TikTok, I recently stitched a video where this guy was talking about where this lady was admitting to this guy that he should just flat out lie about it. And you should just see the comments where they were just like, no, lie. And I'm like, no, don't lie. They're okay.
They will find out.
And it just became this whole thing, and I'm gonna do a series on it. But no, they lie. Don't make up. Do not try to cover up.
Well, I was trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. Very kind of you. Very diplomatic of you. They be lying. We are gonna call it what it is. All right.
All right. We're calling it what it is. So when they lie on their application and tell you they know how to do X, Y, Z, and then then you get them in the office and you've spent 2 weeks training them and discover that they don't know how to do that. And that is like a vital piece of what Like, I'm willing to train people, but I need to know what you know, so I know how to set up your training.
Right. It should be a core competency.
Yeah. And even if it's like, hey, I have a basic knowledge of this, but I don't know how you're going to use it. And so that was something that I started implementing as part of it. Like, hey, you have to do this. Since we're a remote firm, you have to be able to follow written instructions. And you have to read all of the instructions in order to do that. So I made a task that they needed to do. And at the very bottom, there's a piece that they need to know at the beginning. I mean, it's just little things that you can do to test their abilities to follow instructions, test their skills. Are they going to ask questions? There's a couple of things in mind that are specifically vague. So I can tell if they're going to ask me a question, if they're going to, ask me a question or try to bluff their way through it, and, are they going to try to be like, okay, I'm going to figure this out on my own, I'm scared of asking questions? Or
Right.
are they someone that will come in and be like, hey, I'm not sure what you meant by this, can you give more
More
clarification?
clarity. Right.
You
Right.
know, and so, you know, there's, in my situation, that's what works. But in other situations, you know, there are ways that you can test those things up front. You know,
Right.
are you going to pay attention to the instructions? Are you going to, you know, my instructions say you have to go and use my Calendly link to schedule an appointment with me. Don't send me
Mhm.
your resume. Don't, that's not what I want. You have to
Right.
schedule the appointment, and then you get
Mhm.
the instructions for the next step. And so
Mhm.
if they read through my listing and then they send me their resume through LinkedIn or whatever, I
Yeah.
don't even contact them because
Yeah.
they didn't
They
follow
didn't
the
pay attention.
instructions.
Right.
And so for me, that attention to detail is important. And so I
Mhm.
want somebody who's going to pay attention to that. So then you can figure out these little tests that you can do to see if someone is going to be a good fit, rather than
Yeah.
just hiring somebody and hoping that their skills actually match with what they said they were.
Right. Yeah, no, that definitely would help reduce some turnover for sure. Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Um, are there any ways to manage onboarding costs? I mean, I know there's like some things that you just can't really help because you just got to cough it up, but is there a way to kind of help manage it even if you have to spread it out over time? I know that's one thing that we end up having to do, or like just kind of like triaging them, but are there other ways to kind of help manage those costs?
Yeah, so absolutely. Onboarding costs, like we talked about, you know, you've got those, you got some that you can't do anything about. You
Yeah.
know, hey, you're adding a new user to your software, the cost is going to be what the cost is going to be. You
Right.
know, you can't finagle it with them.
Right.
But, you know, maybe you do at that point look at a different software and
Mm,
say, you know, is this the software we want to use, because it's going to be charging us, you know, that's something you keep in mind when you're looking for a new software for your
right.
business. Now,
Mhm.
sometimes, you know, hey, this is the best software there is, and we really want to use this one because it links with XYZ, and, you know, it's the gold standard,
Right.
you know, for
Mhm.
that. So we're like, yes, absolutely, don't mess with that. But, you know, you can look at those things and make sure if it's not one of those that it's a gold standard, it's just one you've been using. Maybe you look and see, you know, is there a different, cheaper way to do this than
Mhm.
what other software are we currently using that we might not have to add a new user to?
Right.
Um, those type of things. Sometimes, you know, we forget that Google has so much more than just email.
Yeah.
So we're just,
Mm.
you know, when we're setting that up, hey, can we use Google Tasks to to put those tasks in instead of a whole another system
Mhm.
to communicate? Can we use Google Docs? Can we use, you know, all of these things to help manage this, rather than getting something, buying a big new CRM system or something, you
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
In some cases, like I said, you have that gold standard and you want that for a reason. But if it's not, if it's just a nice to have, those are some things to consider.
Right.
Another thing to consider is, of course, if you can, like office furniture and things like that, you can buy those
Mm.
used.
Mm.
You know, it does not have to be a brand new office setup. You know, if
Right.
you're hiring for someone in the office, um, if there's part-time people, can they share equipment?
Mhm.
You know, because one person is working this on maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the other person is working Tuesday, Thursday. You know, then
Right.
they can share that equipment, and you don't have to buy another computer or another desk
Right.
for that person. I'm
Yeah.
thinking of office scenarios, so
Mhm.
I don't know what scenarios you might have out there that are available, but those are just some ideas that I'm coming across and thinking about. You know, as shop your insurance provider,
Mm.
um, with, you know, with when you add new hires, that's always a good time to go ahead and maybe reach out to a new insurance agent and
Mhm.
shop around, kind of get
Yeah.
a couple of quotes to see who's going to be the better deal.
Right.
Of course, you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples on the coverage
Right.
with insurance, but those are some things that you can do with that as well to lower those onboarding costs. Finding ways and cheaper ways to put ads out there, free or cheap, advertising opportunities. I like hire my mom for where I send my ads. It's usually really cheap and easy, and I get a lot of good hits. So figure out that place that you're going to be able to get the most bang for your buck.
Okay.
When you're putting out those hiring ads.
Okay. No, that makes sense. All right. So let's see. What role do you play in the hiring process as an accountant?
Well, as an accountant or as the business owner?
Well, as an accountant.
So as an accountant to my clients?
Yes.
To my clients. My role with my clients is a lot of hands off. So what I would do is essentially help them figuring out these direct and indirect costs and kind of figure out the cost of hiring another person. That would probably be the role that I have the most if they reach out to me and ask me for that. Usually it's after the fact that I start hearing about it. I'm also part of the onboarding process if we do payroll for them. So getting that paperwork on, and getting them set up in the payroll system. Those are usually things that I'm dealing with. Excuse me.
Okay. Yeah.
So that would kind of be my purpose in doing it. I would recommend definitely if you're thinking about hiring, sit down with your accountant if they're willing to do so.
Right.
And if they're not, probably need to look for another accountant, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
But sit down with your accountant and talk to them about figuring out the cost of hiring someone new and adding them to your team and what that's going to look like, because then they can help you figure out, hey, this is what it's going to cost you if you're adding another person, and there's a lot of costs you don't think about, like we talked about earlier. There's so many of those costs that come up and you're like, I did not realize it was going to cost me this much extra on the software side of things, just to add another person to it. And so that can get very cost prohibitive. And so you want to know that you can afford it during that time as well.
And is the basis the industry that you're in, or is it just the type of business that you run in particular?
I think a little bit of both.
A little bit of
so
both.
Your basis is going to be a little bit of both, because there's going to be industry standards that you have to follow. Like there's certain things that I have to be careful of if you're in a medical field.
Right.
HIPAA compliance is really big. So you can't just use any software, so that's going to be a thing for you, that you have to make sure, all of my client facing software, anything that has the client information on it, that's HIPAA compliant, as a medical provider. Whereas, I have certain things that I need in my industry. We need, one of the things we have is our client portal, and the big thing about that is that it has bank level security on it.
Encryptions and
things, so that they can upload payroll documents that have social security numbers and bank numbers and know that it's going to be secure in transit and where it's stored and all of that, so that they're not worried about, oh my gosh, this gets hacked and we've got, all these client names and bank account numbers floating around in cyberspace, and so those type of things, those are going to be industry specific, but then you're also going to have to figure, like for myself, because I'm remote versus someone who has an office and all their team is on site, the type of security that we have to have is different. So if we have an on-site team, I don't necessarily have to have as secure maybe not as secure of a cloud system because I can, secure the internet that we're working on. Whereas because I'm remote, I have to figure out ways to encrypt the files that are hanging out in the cloud because
that's open.
That's how we communicate. My staff needs to be able to access it, but at the same time, we want it secure so that the hackers can't get into it.
Got you. No, that makes sense. Okay. So last question before we go. What metrics do you track to measure the success of your hiring process?
We look at their performance. So we set them up with some performance goals and kind of give them some ideas of, hey, this is what we're working towards. I do a lot of this is what done, or this is what success looks like with them, so that they know what they're reaching for, and then we're able to track that and be able to look at, okay, where are we meeting success? Is it, do we need more training? Is there a gap in knowledge and training, or is this just I'm not working on the job?
Right.
I'm a remote worker, so I think I can work not at all, which has happened.
It happens, yeah, for sure.
And so you find those things that you can track. For me, one of the things that I did was, instead of creating hours for my admin work, we go by the task, and I pay them per task that they accomplish. Each task has a rating and a price attached to it, and they do 15 emails, they get this much money for doing those 15 emails. Gotcha. Because for me, the important thing is that the emails get done, not how many hours they sat in front of the computer.
Right. So how did you come up with that, the price, appropriate price for the number of emails completed?
Yeah, so for that, I kind of looked at about how long I expected them to spend on that, and then put a dollar amount to it based on, okay, if you do this number of emails, and you're responding to it, it's going to take, 15, 20 minutes, and then gotcha. This is how many you should be able to do in an hour. This is what it would be if it was an hourly rate, kind of back into it that way. And make sure that it's some kind of form, something that makes sense and that it's adding up. When you put it together and the tasks that they're doing, that should add up to what you would want to pay them if they were doing 20 hours a week, or how many ever hours you think the job is going to be.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. So if anyone wanted to get a hold of you for like services or consulting, how would they go about doing that?
You can reach out on my website, mlpaccounting.com, really easy. I'm also online, just about anywhere, Facebook, LinkedIn, all the places.
Yeah.
You can look me up by my name or by the business, MLP Accounting and Consulting. And then we also, you can email me at lydia@mlpaccounting.com.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Lydia. I think it was awesome. Learned a lot. We talked about a lot. We covered our basis, and I think this was good. How do you feel?
Yeah, this was awesome. Awesome. I enjoyed it. I had a great time, and I'm glad that you asked me, and I'd love to come back and do another session with you sometime.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for listening to the Mental Money Podcast. Please go ahead and remember to subscribe, but don't hoard all of this good information for yourself. Share this information with someone that you know could use it, especially if they need a shift in their mindset, or someone who would love to have more money. So until we meet again, remember, like Uncle Snoop said, keep your mind on your money and your money on your mind.